everybody, welcome in. Thank you so much for joining me. Please pardon me, I'm a few minutes late. If you've been waiting, I appreciate you. So today I wanted to talk a bit about something that's come up in a session with a client today, and then also a client session request. And one thing I want to tap into is the specifics in cleaning your sexual body. And what does that mean? What does that entail? How does our sexual body affect us? And specifically what came up today with a client was, and this is a little bit intermediate, advanced, so if you have questions, please let me know and I'll be happy to answer them. Though a lot of us understand when we're tuning into cleaning out the sexual body and we're tracking demonic access. The demonic realm, as we've talked about before on this channel, they have such a exponential lifespan that it behooves them to track the different souls in which they tune into and re-up on these contracts life after life. So what I mean by that is specifically, for example, archdemons like Moloch and Baal, they all of them, though Moloch specifically has a tremendous amount of contracts or marital rights with a lot of different souls, because Moloch understands that if he moves through the hey Knee Deep, she says, hi Chloe, I was actually going to ask you to do a video on this. Okay, great, perfect, we're in tune. So and hello to you, I'm so glad you connected with Casey. She told me that it was wonderful, so that's awesome. So okay, getting back to Moloch. Moloch did a ton of sexual marital contracts throughout all of the ages. And what a lot of these entities tend to do is, in order to re-up and refortify the contracts that they have with the different spirits and ensure that they can still utilize the soul's energy, they will track the soul life after life and re-up on a contract, re-up on the contract. So it's extremely common to have, depending on how big of a being and how long you've existed. Okay, let's say you've got 1,000+ contracts with Moloch, not because you're an evil, horrible person. No, you're as normal as big beings are, okay? It's simply what happens in the human's ignorance of what's actually going on. And these entities, they're multidimensional. So they know how to tap into multiple realms and timelines all in the same time, right? Utilizing the true now moment and refortify the energies or the access points they have to different people and different souls. So that's something that you have to understand strategy when it comes to clearing out that type of energy. And a reason why you would want to do that is, for example, if you are experiencing loop cycles like most of us have in our life, and we keep, let's say, for example, we keep attracting the wrong love partners, and you've done the work, you understand that this, goes back to some childhood trauma where you had unhealthy caretakers modeling examples of love and relationship. Though even after doing that deep dive of shadow work to clear out those traumas and initial woundings from your inner child work, you're still having these experiences where you're either still attracted to, because you can always attract them. It doesn't mean you're going to be attracted to unhealthy people, even if they're attracted to you. So you're still attracted to these, toxic, negative attachments, and or you're still sensing the sexual energetics in your field, even if you are free and clear of humans and physical people that you're attracted to. You've now overcome that. You're healthy in your relationships, though you're still acutely aware, because you're sensitive and intuitive, that there's still lingering energetics in your field. That's one huge reason why it would be really important to dive into this. And then the other topic I wanted to talk about today, and it's up to you guys, we can take this anywhere you want, but this is just what I put on the plate for today. The second topic is the afterlife. So I would like to share a bit about my experiences with the afterlife and connecting with them and what's actually going on. And, commonalities. For example, it is very, very common that beings, and this can be animals, not just humans, when they die, when they leave this body and they cross, or you think they cross, it's very common that they don't cross. Very common. More common than you would think. And the reason that usually happens is because of an emotional bond. And ultimately, we want them to cross. If they haven't crossed over, there's something that they don't feel is finished. And oftentimes, more often than not, in my experience, the feedback I receive from those souls is that they're concerned about the loved ones that are still living in our physical realm. So we have to learn how to help them understand what we desire for them and come to some common ground in how to keep and maintain this relationship, even though it significantly shifts because they're no longer in the physical. So these are my topics for today. Thank you so much. Before we get going, let us say a prayer. Another big thing that I wanted to, well, actually, let's say a prayer first, and then I'll tap into that because that goes right along with the prayer. So, Spirit, Creator, Source of all eternal life, thank you so much. We acknowledge your omnipotence, your divine power and awe. Thank you for protecting us, for supporting us, for assisting us through our ignorance and our arrogance and our naivete. Thank you for always being reverent and patient with us, Spirit. We understand that it is impossible for us to understand and clarify what it is that you know is best and desire as a higher outcome for the all that is. Thank you so much for never giving up on us and for always guiding us through and through. Thank you for being patient with us when we lose our way and continuously striving to help us steer back on the right path. Please, Spirit, help us to understand how it is we can repent and make amends for our wrongdoings and our ignorance. Thank you for always protecting and supporting us and making your best efforts to show us signs and signals and synchronicities so that we may understand how we can help ourselves. Spirit, please reach out and touch all the members of this community. Please assist them to find their resilience, their happiness, their joy, their strength. Help them to understand that they are so beautiful. They are so strong and wonderful. Help them to see themselves through your eyes, Spirit, your heart. Help us to care for ourselves first and foremost, Spirit. Please assist us to find our self-love through and through. And in that way, we can understand that I am, and I am you. Help us, Spirit, to assist all of the other people around us. How can we emanate this radiance, this divine glory, and pour that out in a way that doesn't drain us, that actually replenishes us, and we can be a shining light and a beacon to all of those around us. We are so grateful, Spirit, for your support. We trust in you. We strive continuously to be in unwavering faith, and we understand that that is not just some spiritual concept, it is quantum access. And Spirit, please assist me to filter out any negativity, any evil eye. Help me to communicate what it is that needs to be talked about for those that will view this video currently or in any time in the future. Please assist me to speak to their hearts, and please help me to offer the wisdom or receive the wisdom back from this community that would support all of us at this time. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you. We pay homage and gratitude to the ancestors and all of the beings that are assisting us throughout all the realms and dimensions, and this includes all kingdoms. We're including crystal, mineral, plant, animal. Thank you, Spirit. We love you. As above, so below, and so it is, thy will be done. Okay, I also want to offer up a prayer and an energetic overflow of support, first and foremost, to the 165 young girls that died in the bombing on Iran territory in their school from an American missile. In addition to that, I want to speak to their souls for any of them that are lingering in shock and in horror and in trauma that have not yet given themselves permission to cross over. I also want to assist and support their families and their loved ones and all of them that have been touched and devastated by this tragedy. And so I ask all of you to take a moment and tune into your hearts, ground your feet into the earth, feel your ability to anchor in this now moment and understand that through the power invested in you by the creator of all that is, you have the amazing ability to amplify love within your being and allow it to radiate out in all now moments in all directions through space-time. We send mass amounts of love and support and care and nurturance and empathy to those that I have just spoken of. And we ask Spirit and all of the guides and all of the loved ones that are efforting to support everyone we have just mentioned to send a massive wave of calm and safety and peace to the spirits of the young girls that have passed on. And we ask Spirit to assist them if it is within divine order and their highest outcome, to help them see that it is safe for them to cross over and move into the space that their spirit originated from. Help them to understand that they are best to serve their family and their loved ones in the space that they originate from. And in fact, that is how they can connect with those loved ones even more thoroughly. Please assist their families to find the peace, move through the grief, and process in some form, offering them a superhuman feat of the ability to heal their hearts. And while they will never be able to be the same again after they have lost someone in such a devastating way, in such a way that should never have happened, we ask that they are constantly receiving a massive cocoon of support and love, and understand that there are millions and millions of us, Spirit, that want to offer them help, that care, that do not approve of what is happening. And we send out so much love, and we effort in our hearts and our thoughts and our actions to connect as a community, as a brethren of sisters and brothers that support each other and do not approve of what's happening with powers of be that do not have our best interests in mind. We know that we can overcome this if only within our trust and our will. Thank you, Spirit. We send this out to all that can be in need of this. As above, so below, and so it is, that will be done. Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate you. All right, starting with the sexual body. So we spoke before, guys, on how our sexual body, and there's many, many bodies, so I will reiterate. We are all aware of our physical body. We also have an emotional body. We have an energetic body. We have a mental body, a psychological body, an etheric body, astral body. We have a causal body. It goes on and on and on. Lots of bodies. Sexual body. So our sexual body is multidimensional, and it is highly alchemistic, which is very, thank you, Needeep, may it be so. It's alchemistic in a way that is obvious when we think about it, because we require our sexual body in order to alchemize life, which means it is something that brings spirit into form. It is a bridge. It is a cross through. And like all of the bodies, they all interconnect with each other. Our sexual body is our direct line to spirit. And it's very important to continuously clean all of our bodies, nobody in their right mind would go an entire year without changing the oil in their car. How come we go almost our entire lives without changing the energy in our bodies, right? Without doing all of these things. So our sexual body is multidimensional, and once we make a contract with any individual through sexual engagement, whether that sexual action was permissible by us, it doesn't even matter if it was a massive betrayal, if we were raped, all of these things. Regardless, unfortunately, if any action has taken place through a sexual body, it tethers to the other individual. And these tethers are intriguing because, for example, there is a experience that a lot of so-called spiritualists have where they are conducting relationships in the etheric realm. Now, this comes hand in hand with the whole twin flame psyop. We talked about psyops last live, okay? If you guys need me to dive into this, I can further explain it. But they're engaging in these intimate relationships in the astral realms with other beings or other people or other people's astral energetic bodies. And in that space, you can even tether sexually. It won't be quite the same as it is acting through your physical sexual abilities, though nevertheless, that still counts. So we have these tethers in our sexual body, and we start leaking our energy. And every time we tether to an individual in our sexual body, we open our energetics up potentially, unless you know how to filter this out, okay? You can block this and put up your boundaries and your filters, though you have to constantly energetically be re-upping on this. Once you tether to somebody sexually, it doesn't mean it shifts just because you've broken up with them or they're no longer in your life. You're still tethered if you haven't done the work. And that means what happens, hey, Urban Alchemistics, greeting and salutations to you too. If you tether to somebody sexually, now potentially you have access, energetically speaking, to every sexual partner they have ever had. And they have access to every sexual partner you have ever had. And then, think about that indirectly. Then you have access to every sexual partner that other partner has ever had. And really quickly, it just turns into a massive web of sexual energetics. And the example I always use is, this is one reason why it's so common, maybe more for women than men. And I only say that because women are usually a lot more nuanced in their emotional body than men, is that a woman can pick up so quickly on the energetics of their current partners, previous partners, or anybody lingering in their field. They will feel it, right? And they won't necessarily know what it is, and depending on their self-respect and confidence, they might think that is something that's like, this man is cheating on me, or he hasn't let go, or whatever, right? They might feel that other person pressing into the relationship, things like that. That's very common. And that's happening mostly because the sexual tethers are still there. That can still happen, obviously, if he's engaging with other people in any way, even just mentally. And it can happen if that past person is pressing their energy into his field or your relationship. But that's a lot more manageable when it's happening that way. If the sexual body's clean, it's a lot easier to put up these boundaries, okay? So the client today was asking about, because she, like you two on the chat right now, Urban Alchemistic and Knee Deep, have done the work. You know how to go in and access your sexual body and start doing the complex cleansing and clearing. And she's going through the timelines and the energetics, though she's aware that even though she knows that her will is bond, when she's doing these statements of clearing out the demonic principalities, and guys, it's very common. I'll just tell you straight up, from my experience, it's very common to find the demonic principalities in your energetic field. Okay. Now, one reason that is, just across the board, from my perspective, is that we're existing in a fallen realm. So this realm, it's a lot easier for the demonic realms to navigate than the higher, spiritual hierarchy that people like you and I want to be engaging with. So in a significant way, they have a pretty big dominion here. So, and they also, because they're multidimensional, they know how to weave in and out of people all the time. So it's not difficult for a demon to walk on through you throughout the day, because there's just almost infinite ways in which they can access your field if you don't know the laws. There's so many things that we think about as a sin, right? People slip and slide all day long in their mind when they get tired, when they have a grudge, when they're emotional. And so this is just those entities weaving in and out. And that might sound scary to people, but it's just the way it is, right? You'd probably all be horrified if we could actually see, as clearly as I could see you if you're standing right in front of me, how many entities are around us and moving through us throughout the day. It's pretty incredible. So the demons are slippery little suckers, right? And since they're re-upping these contracts life after life after life, it's very common to have trouble clearing out that energy, because you're not only dealing with proper lifetimes, maybe where, let's say, like, in biblical days or the Egyptian times, when the people were actually interfacing with these bigger beings and the Nephilim and things like this, and Elohim, and they're having direct contact. So there's lifetimes where potentially you had direct sexual engagement with the actual entity embodied. So that's one thing, and that's very potent. But in another way, there are experiences where you're having engagements with people that are also overtaken or being used by these demons. And how I just spoke of how easy it is for the demons to go in and out, that's like an infinite number, right, of demonics potentially accessing your field and vice versa. And so it's very important to learn how to clear out these energies. And tracking the timelines is one thing, okay? You don't have to be astute at tracking timelines to do this. So I don't want this to worry you because you don't know how, or don't trust that you're accessing every lifetime. I mean, there's so many lifetimes. Urban Alchemistic says, yes, indeed. And they recognize us immediately that we're not one of them. Absolutely. We're like these big, bright, flashing neon signs to them. And we're right for the pickings, right? Because we talked about Loosh, last live or 2 lives ago? And that's just the nature of the game, okay? So understanding how they are contracting to us is very important. So obvious ways that they're contracting to us, as I just spoke of, are these lifetimes where maybe in that culture, the religion was that you worship Baal or Moloch, which is very, very common. I mean, if you look back in a lot of these different cultures, those were the deities of the times that now in Christianity we call our archdemons. And so it's highly likely that you're going to have lifetimes where in your ignorance you didn't know, you were worshiping or praying to or offering yourself up to beings that you don't want to be connected in that way. And that's still happening today. That's one big beef I have with certain words. And this is not a judgment on anybody who, this is your language, but my word is not God. My word is not Lord. I do not perceive that the God that people interpret, spoken throughout, the Christian Bible and even the books of Judaism, is one being. I think there are many different deities that move through those texts that take on the same namesake because of our ignorance. And in that way, many, many different entities can slip on the namesake and utilize the benefits of those that are praying to or paying homage to or everything else to that namesake. So I hope that makes sense. That's very, very common. So that's one way it can happen. And then another way is, all of us, well, I shouldn't say all of us, a lot of us know what it's like to be in an unhealthy, toxic relationship. And those are dynamics where these demonics love slipping in and out of that stuff, right? It's easy for them to move through those experiences. Now, besides the obvious of these big contracts where we've had, rituals, we've had lifetimes where we've sacrificed ourselves to these demons, we've been on the altar, we've been the virgin brides, all of these things, and everywhere in between, because I perceive that if you've lived enough lifetimes, you've done it all. You've been on every end of every possible encounter, because first of all, that's one thing you're existing for, is to experience, in my interpretation of our existence. And also because we just fall into things, right? So one way in which we can dive in and do the clearing work is when you're tracking these bigger entities, and it doesn't have to be just demonic, okay? There are a lot of entities that are going to utilize your sexual body because they know how potent and powerful it is and how efficient it is for them to access all of you. In order to uproot these bigger contracts, you have to also be able to track your emotional body. So think about sex. At our peak experiences, whether it be pleasure or whether it be pain, we are emotionally spiked, the biggest loosh possible, okay? And this goes on either end of the spectrum. This can be, the highest states of orgasm and bliss, and the most horrific states of being sodomized or what have you. Either end of that spectrum, and everything in between is a massive emotional upheaval. Your body opens up. Think about that energetically. It's like a volcano, and you're wide open and you're releasing and you're taking in at the same time. Very few people know how to consciously ensure your protections in the midst of those emotions, right? And even if you're practicing sacred sexuality, it's not that you're even consciously holding boundaries in those moments of like orgasm or connection with your sacred beloved. It's that you've done the work to refortify the energetics, that you trust in the boundaries holding, so that you don't have to focus on it 24/7 throughout the entire ritual of sexuality. Things like this, okay? So to track the root of where the archdemons are accessing in, which can be a big feat. I'll be straight up with you guys. You might have to do a lot of different lifetimes to get this done. We have to find the root of the emotions that they're utilizing. And they're smart, they're savvy, and they are highly adept and efficient and masters of manipulating and maneuvering through these realms. So they know not to just follow one emotional experience. They know to double down, right? Check their P's and Q's, have plan A, B, C, and everything in between, and move through all of the emotions so that if you uproot one, they still got this one in check, okay? So I hope that makes sense. So the reason this came up today, again, is because this client is trying to track, and she does her revocations, and she what was her word? Banishes them out of her field, though she still feels it lingering. And this is one big reason why, because there's a lot of things going on in these situations. So it's very important to understand, this is something my mentor taught me a lot about, is understanding your self-agency. The word sovereignty gets thrown around a lot in the spiritual community. I throw it around a lot too. And in my perspective, it's not an accurate term to be using, because for me, I don't interpret that we have the ability to be fully sovereign in this realm. We don't exist within a realm that is sovereign. So in some way, we have forfeited a significant amount of our sovereignty, to a certain extent, simply by the process of incarnation, okay? Though even though we might not be as sovereign as we know is our truth outside of this realm, we can command our self-agency and our authority. And when you anchor into that knowing, unwavering, that's when your word is bond. And that's something that this client has a really good handle on. But what I'm always telling everybody, including myself, is our blind spot and our weakest link is as strong as we are. Okay? So, if you're a student and a disciple of the spiritual arts and these metaphysical sciences, and you're really on point with your shadow work and you're constantly striving to do better and be more, because that's just your existence, then it will behoove you to understand that always, in any aspect of life, this doesn't even matter spiritually speaking in my experience, your blind spot is as strong as you are. You're only as strong as the weakest link, okay? And so understanding your blind spot is very important. And you will accelerate faster than you've ever accelerated in anything if you continuously track your blind spot and work to become aware of it. And usually this requires feedback from objective parties, because by the nature of it being your blind spot, it's going to be very difficult for you to see it, right? And so one way of doing that, obviously, is work with a professional. That's their job, is to help access and reveal your blind spot to you so that you can start to reframe and do the work. But outside of professional help, your loved ones, they see you through and through, just like you see them. So if you have the ability to have these conversations with these people, they can help you understand your blind spots. Your moments of trauma, where do you get triggered? Where do you react? These are your blind spots, okay? Where's your ego? Where's your arrogance? These are your blind spots. So these are things that it's very important to look at, because these are the places that these demonic principalities and entities and what have you are hiding in. That's where they're staying, behind the veil. And so for her role now is to learn how to track more of her emotional body, okay? And once she can tap into, and the way we do this, the way I do this, if you guys haven't done inner child work, then that's something that I really hope, I implore that you start to look into this. I strongly believe, and I told Knee Deep this the other day when we talked last week, I think I told you this, is that from my perspective, and this includes animals, okay? This includes animals. We are all walking around as little children with adult bodies, okay? We are also, most of us are still emotionally enmeshed. We are reacting through our inner child, but we have this bigger body, so it seems really weird and doesn't make sense. And once you learn how to recognize your loop patterns, right, and do this work and track back to your inner child wounds, when you track back and you find that wound of the cycle you're repeating, that's what I term a frequency signature. So now you know, here's a core wound and here's a core emotion. And this is part of my work. This has been my blind spot, but now I'm looking at it. So you take your biggest core wounds and you understand, if you perceive in reincarnation and looping karma, that wound did not start in this life. You are proliferating this forward. That's been a big loop. So there you go. Here's an emotional signature of a wound that'll go back. And this is how you can start tracking back to those entities and other timelines. Now, of course, you've had a lot of experiences. And the trick is that it's not about the situation that happened in regard for you to anchor this core wound. The situation is important when you're actually tracking the lifetime and you need to do the healing. But if you're reading frequency signatures and you're wanting to expand more into your quantum field and your multidimensionality, then it's important for you to be able to access that frequency signature, which is the core wound, regardless of how you experience the wounding. You're only looking at the concentrated energy of the emotional experience. How did that feel in your body? How did you interpret that? And then you let go of everything else, of how it happened or why it happened. All there is in this moment is you and that experience, that feeling, that emotion, aka what I call the frequency signature. That's concentrated, and then you use that as a honing beacon to track other timelines where you had that same experience. Because what you will find is that you might have, let's just say 150 lifetimes, what I call timelines, where that was the core wound or a core wound. But in every lifetime, it's a totally different experience and situation, different people, but it's the same feeling. That's why it's important for you to let go once you've done the healing in this initial life, or at least seen it, because it's like an onion, it's layered. We might come back to that our whole life in some way, especially if it's a very big trauma, right? Especially if it's a sexual trauma, because it goes through all of our bodies. And so at least we've identified it. And now when we're tracking other timelines, we understand it's not necessarily about how we anchored it in this life. That might run a theme, but it's kind of like when you remember that game Telephone? When you say something to somebody and it goes around, and when it comes back around, it's totally different. It probably ran the same theme, like a few people, and these people right now are representing a lifetime, then it totally changes. Same frequency, totally different story. So you have to be able to suspend the story, because if you go trying to track a matching story with the exact same people, the same souls, right, you're only going to get so far. It's the frequency of the emotion. I really hope that makes sense. And please ask any questions if you're interested in this. If you want to share stories, I'm totally open to it. So this is a very important thing around our sexual body. Now, if you guys are interested and you don't know how to do the sexual body clearing, I created a sexual body clearing. It's on sale in my shop, chloe-hudson.com. That'll take you through the process. Okay, and you can come back to it as many times as you want, and I highly advise that you do this many, many times. This is something we can all be doing, constantly re-upping, especially when you first start. It does take multiple times to do this clearing out work. One, if only, like what we talked about, because we're not anchored in our authority and our agency, and our word is not bond enough that we can clear it all out that quickly. And also, we're not aware of the emotional ramifications of the experience. Okay, let me check something real quick, guys. Sorry. So that's one thing that I think is very, very important. Now, another thing about sexual body clearing is that, okay, sorry guys, mute my TikTok, it was muted. Okay, so sexual body clearing. Now, another thing that's very important to understand when you're doing this work is, first of all, and I did mention this before, that if you're in a current partnership or relationship with somebody, you can still do this healing work. And I highly advise you do. I think it's really, really important to do sexual body clearing. And here's why. Because when you clean your sexual body with your current partner, they usually have not cleaned their own sexual body. And that's not something that, unless your partner's really open, it's not going to be the most comfortable and understood thing, or even appropriate for you to be like, hey, I'd really like for you to clean your sexual body. This is how you do it. It's gonna be kind of weird. I've been there, I've done that. I'll get permission and I will go to town on a partner and clean their sexual body. I will do the work. Now, I always get permission, but I double down in the beginning of a relationship, because I don't want any of that. I'm very, very particular One of my best friends used to call me a prude. You know, I really need my sexual body to be clean, and I can't relax with a partner if I'm concerned about their sexual body being mucked up simply because they're ignorant to the process, like most people are. Okay, not because they're sexually dirty or anything. It's just we accumulate. We don't know how to do the work, right? So when you do a sexual body clearing with your current partner, first of all, you clean out any of that junk. And if they haven't done the work, I do suggest you keep refortifying and cleansing out this energy. And a lot of us have unhealthy tethers with people. It's very easy to shift into these kind of codependent patterns and stuff like this. And cleaning your sexual body is very helpful to clear that stuff out and reset so that you have a clean, loving, heart open connection with this individual. And it does a tremendous amount of cleansing around any emotional upsets or any energy that was in the field, or, you know, it's just a good practice is to constantly cleanse out your energetic body and your sexuality. And it helps you feel more in your independence, more autonomous. And you could be amazed at how much energy of yours is gone. It's out of your field. It's being pulled by other people. You didn't have a clue. And that's a common thing, is a lot of us don't know how more energetic we can feel, or more independent or cleansed we can feel, until we receive that energy back, until we've done the cleansing. It's a blind spot. We don't know what we don't know. We aren't aware that, you know, we're not at our top peak energetics. We're not aware that so much energy is being drained out, right? Or that there's chaos in the field, or that our energetics is being siphoned. Sturge, thank you for that like. I appreciate you. So very important to do your sexual body cleansing and clearing, okay? So I won't keep harping on that unless you guys have questions about it. But I do think it's really, really important. Your sexuality is so potent. It has so much life force energy for you to tune into, not only healing your own energetics, but, you know, accessing spirit and beyond. And if you are dealing with entities and, you know, people, I'll say people, but entities in people that are monitoring you and doing this type of invasive energy, that's one huge way in which they're getting access, is through your emotional body and your sexual body, if you went there with somebody like that. So it's very, very important in those cases to do this clearing work. Now, shifting topics, I wanted to touch on, I had a client reach out who, her beloved dog is about to cross over. She's about to cross the Rainbow Bridge. And it just made me think about how intimate and personal and unique the experience of how people process death is. I was watching some near-death experience videos the other day, and I love watching those because it's such an interesting case study and interpretation of what, from my take, people manifest when they leave their body, regardless if they return or not, right? And it's so very different. And they've done studies where even culturally it's different. So for example, it's very common in the Western countries for us to experience, once we leave this body, a beautiful white or golden tunnel of light that pulls us magnetically up towards it. And then if you are looking at people who have had a lot of NDEs in places like New Zealand, what's very common for them is that they journey in their belief, in their culture, there is an island. The afterlife is an island, which is like an in-between. And so when they have these NDEs, they actually travel to this island. It's not the tunnel of light. So that speaks to very potently our belief system, right? So what is it that we're experiencing or creating, you know, in the afterlife that aligns with our belief system, that's something that would be comfortable for us, and that, that we could ingest and process and understand once we leave this body, because that can be a very confusing time, right? And I've had a lot of experiences as a telepathic communicator and somebody who has offered support to those who have crossed over, and people who have lost people who have crossed over, to check in with them and see if they've actually crossed. This comes up a lot for me, okay? I watched a video recently it's called the Eternal Life Sciences, and this student of this belief system went through the different blood types, and from this modality's perspective, the gifts, right, the access points that each blood type has a propensity for. My specific blood type, as this video was stating, has a propensity to be a bridge between the realms. And I really resonated with that, because that's very much been my experience even before I became spiritual. I would just have these experiences where I'd be somehow dealing with the afterlife, or before, beings come in, things like this. So I am very comfortable in those situations as acting as a bridge, whether it's helping clients bring a child into their womb, or helping beings cross over, people communicate with spirits that are on the other side, everything in between. What's very, very common for me is that we go check in, or maybe somebody that I know who has crossed over comes to me telepathically, energetically, and they say, hey, my loved one needs help them cross over, okay? So it's more common than people would probably think that beings don't cross. And the biggest reason I have seen is because they're emotionally tethered to somebody who is still in this realm. So I know that it is a commonality for people, or animals even, who died in horrific traumatic experiences where they might still linger because of the shock of that death, or maybe because there was something nefarious around how they died and they're trying to get the answers out. And that's something that I think we see more often than not in like Hollywood interpretations of ghosts or spirits that haven't crossed. But I haven't necessarily dealt with a ton of those types of passings. My experience has been, even though people die in a lot of different ways, and most animals are just put down or cross from old age or complications, they're really tethered to their loved ones. And it's not difficult, guys. It is not difficult to help a being cross. It is actually quite simple. So if you are concerned that this hasn't happened, that they haven't crossed over, I would ask you to effort to help them cross. And usually it's just them becoming aware of what's fully happening, and that it's safe for them to cross, and that you actually want them to, because they're usually worried, first of all. There is a phenomenon I've noticed where, first of all, something that I would experience when a client would call me up or book a session to tune into somebody that had just crossed over, and or I'm trying to tune into a loved one who's just crossed. And what I've consistently found is that they're not accessible for the first 2 to 3 Earth days, our time. That's why I say Earth days, but in our timeline, because they don't have the same timeline at all anymore, for basically 48 hours plus, usually 2 to 3 days, they're not accessible. And they're going through this transition stage. And I really appreciated that years later that was validated when I said that to a client who was versed in Buddhism, and they told me that is what the Buddhists say as well. I said, oh, that's cool. That validates what I'm experiencing. So that's something to note. Though, if they're not crossing, they're accessible, okay? In the first calendar year from, the date of their death to a year later, the veil is thin. So it's also common that you'll experience, let's say you've lost a loved one, and you're having, it can go either way. Maybe you're feeling them pretty close to you. You're having dreams about them. You feel their energy. You swear that they're around you, right? And then sometimes to the day of their memorial, their 1 year memorial, the energy shifts, okay? Or it's the other way. It's heavy. The grief is so overwhelming. It's so strong. And then to the day of their 1 year memorial, things lighten. It's because usually, for whatever reason, at the 1 year mark of our calendar year, if they stay on this side of the veil, beyond that, it becomes increasingly more difficult for them to cross on their own. It doesn't mean they can't, they can. But that's when you start dealing with them getting into the possible discarnate soul situation. So I had this experience with my father, who passed in 2016. And even though I was fully telepathic already at the time, we didn't communicate a lot. He seemed to want to be a little bit distant in the communications, and I had my own, because for me, it's, I can always tap into the afterlife. I didn't feel pressed to connect with him because it's a huge transition. So I let that be, and I was processing my own emotions. And I had my grief and that whole experience. And fast forward, I wasn't thinking about his memorial. I wasn't paying attention. And the day of his 1 year memorial was actually also a very significant day in my life, with events happening that should have been quite joyous. And these events played out. And after I left this function, I get in my car and I'm overwhelmed with grief, and I start crying. And I'm trying to logically equate this to that event, which didn't make sense because it was, a celebratory experience in my life. And I let it be, and then the next day I got a text from somebody who was very close to my father, acknowledging that the previous day was his memorial that I hadn't remembered. And, she was just doing her best wishes. And as soon as I read that text, I realized, oh, no wonder. It was his 1 year mark. And I felt a significant energetic shift, right? And so if you are concerned that somebody hasn't crossed over, one thing I would say to you, or you're even just curious, and again, this happens a lot with animals. Cats are fairly good at crossing. I do have a puss that he says he crossed, but I'm not sure I believe it. and that, his reasons, from my perspective of not fully crossing, are traumatic, right? This is a traumatic thing. Though, for the most part, cats are pretty good at crossing because they're these masters of multidimensional travel. So they're very aware that, on the other side, they can come back and check in and do all these things. And it's actually a lot more efficient for souls to connect and influence us in this realm once they've crossed. It's difficult for them to accomplish what it is they want to get done if they stay too close. Knee Deep says, can your attachment to family members keep them stuck after passing? Absolutely. And this is a point I'm trying to get to, sorry, even though I'm being really long-winded, is the most common reason that they don't cross is because you and them have these emotional tethers to each other. And I don't say that to freak anybody out, okay? That's not a blame at all. It's not for you to start worrying about, oh my God, am I holding them back? Things like this. It's their choice, first of all, okay? They have their own ability and choice in that decision. They might not be fully cognizant of it. It depends on their level of consciousness, though nevertheless, they're responsible for their own existence, just like you're responsible for yours. And one thing that happens, regardless if they crossed or are still lingering here, they can hear and feel everything that you say and think and offer to them. It's not that they're reading all of your thoughts. It's not that they're invading your privacy. But that time delay is gone now. So when your energy is about them and towards them, they receive it. And that's why it's so powerful to tell them. Even if you know that they're about to cross, let them know, reassure them you are safe to cross. If you think they're going to go towards a light, whatever their thing is, right? I have my own beliefs on what's best and where to go, but that's just me. That's not what we're talking about right now. But let them know, reassure them that it's okay for them to leave. It's okay for them to cross over. And if you've watched any of these NDE experiences, something that's extremely common through and through is that once they let go of their body, there's this like curiosity. They're quite detached from the physical vessel that they often see, because now they're out of body and they're like, who's that? Oh, that's me, right? It's kind of this curious thing. And then they often go like wandering. They don't always necessarily get pulled to the other side. So they can be just having this experience of like being out of body. and in that way, while it's probably neat for them to explore, there's not necessarily a trajectory. So you can help them with that trajectory. Let them know your desires for them. Not that you're pressing, it's their decision. But, even though you're in your grief and you love them and you miss them and, you wish things were different, you want for them to be at peace in their new spiritual home, or whatever that verbiage is for you. That's very, very important. I've had a lot of these experiences. So I've had times where, outside of clients, I've had God, I loved this couple. In my early 30s, I lived in the mother-in-law unit of a couple that were in their mid-90s. They were awesome. I just adored this couple. And while I was living there, the wife passed away. And I was so grateful that I was living under this man's roof while that was happening, because I know that he needed the support. And this was a couple that had been together, like, my gosh, I think at the time of passing, they had been married like 65 years or 66 years or something like that, right? Like double my existence. And so for him, and he's already like 95, I think he was very convoluted. A big thing for him was like waking up and she wasn't there. Like that took a really long time for him to wrap his mind around. And I communed with her a lot as when she passed, because I can do that. And I wanted to reassure her that I'm there, he's okay, things like that. And I know that she was scared to die. It was a scary process for her, because, I'd witnessed the way she would react in times where she'd be thinking about something like that before she crossed. And, fast forward, he passed and I wasn't notified of it. And I really wish I had been. I would have loved to be there for it. But once I was aware that he'd crossed, I reached out and I let him know, like, I love you so much. I'm so happy you guys are back together, this whole thing. And he told me that she hadn't crossed. And I thought that was very interesting, because I had been in communion with her when it first happened, but that's not necessarily something I asked her, right? And he said, please help her cross over. And I was like, absolutely, I will. And, I got busy. Life's happening, and this is something that happens a lot. I hate to admit it, but it's common enough, or I shouldn't say super common, but I've had beings come to me and ask favors telepathically, and it just slips my mind. I agree to it, I need to do it, but I just forget or get on some other tangent. So they have to come back and be like, hey, remember? And so he came back and he's like, hey, I need you to do this. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it right now. Because it's like I have to stop and go into meditation. Sometimes my day is just not working out that way. And it did not take long at all, okay? Because she wants more than anything to be with him. He wants to be with her. She just doesn't know how to do it. And she is not clear on what's happening, and that in order to be with him, she needs to cross. And so all it takes is a little bit of guidance, right? And he's right there waiting for her. And it's to reassure her that it's safe and that she's not in the proper place that she needs to be. And then she crosses over and he confirms it, and that's that. Okay, I've had that a lot. I've had it with animals come to me and say, hey, you know, my other animal friend hasn't crossed, things like this. And it doesn't take much, guys. So please feel free to just have this conversation. Even if you're concerned or curious now, let them know. Knee Deep says, I had a haunting in my house before. He was confused why we were in his house. I found out he had smacked his head before he died. I told him where his wife was, that she moved, and the haunting stopped. Very interesting. Ooh, that gives me chills. Yeah. And like when they come out of body, and it makes me think about, I wonder, if they weren't somebody who had some kind of a devout spiritual or religious practice, they might not have that calling to like go to the light, right? Because it's very connected to belief system. And being out of body, which is our true form, you can still navigate the realm. You know, I had my mentor, Lauda Leon, she told me a story about one time she came across like a family. I don't know how they had died, but it was they were ghosts. They were proper discarnate souls that didn't know that they had crossed, and they were interacting with her as if they didn't know, just like every day. And she could see them; most people couldn't. And so that's an interesting thing, because there's, like you're saying, Knee Deep, there's this confusion. There's sometimes it's like don't understand why people aren't responding, right? So you can help them pass over and cross and let them know. And if they're worried, Knee Deep says there's a movie called The Others, exactly that. Yeah. And, you know, if they're worried, sometimes they don't cross because maybe they have a devout belief system that they're going to hell. You know, that's a big one. And what I would say to that is, you know, there's a incredible book. It's called The Book of the Dead. It's a very ancient book, and it goes through, it tells this whole process of what happens through the afterlife. And I think in this book it has it going through like kind of like I think it was a 30-day cycle or something. And what happens in this 30-day cycle, and this whole process has to do around helping, or inevitably the spirit helps themselves realize how powerful and potent their thoughts are. That they're literally creating everything through their thought forms, because it's all belief system. Though that's not a familiar concept to most people, right? People like us are going to realize that pretty quick, right? We may already believe that. It might not be something that anchors so experientially, because we don't immediately manifest something that we think, but we understand the concept and we might believe in that concept. And once we cross over, that concept would probably become very apparent to us once that time delay disappears. And so this book, The Book of the Dead, takes the reader through an understanding or experience of how common it is for spirits or souls to cross over. And I don't say this to freak anybody out, that they put themselves into their own hell because of the way they're thinking. And they don't understand yet that they're manifesting what's happening through their thoughts. And it takes a certain amount of time for them to recognize that all they have to do is change their thought. And immediately it shifts. So it's an experience like this. If you can help them understand, it's about how they're thinking or believing or perceiving, everything shifts immediately. And it's very, very common for dogs and, you know, probably a lot of mammals. I don't have tons of experience with different animals that have crossed over other than dogs and cats. Some horses, you know, but I don't have like a tremendous amount of communications with domesticated animals, because wild animals are very different in this scenario. I think it's a lot more comfortable for them to just cross. They're connected to nature. But it's quite common for domesticated animals, and dogs especially, to stay. And I've had this experience with cat and dog, and it's their choice. You know, I've tried to convince them to cross. Some of them will, but some of them are like, no, I'm going to hang around. That's just what I want to do. You can't stop me. And when I'm ready to cross, I'll cross. I'm like, okay, cool. That's your prerogative. You know what you're doing, right? And so that's that. Knee Deep says, at Urban Alchemistic, it was so interesting, I liked it too. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed. Urban Alchemistic said before that, I remember that movie. I saw it in the movie theaters when it first came out. It was good. I'll have to check it out. I don't think I know what movie you guys are talking about. But that's pretty common. And, you know, we were talking about, like, it takes a tremendous amount of energy for beings to become what we term as poltergeists. It's a lot of manifestation into the physical realm. It takes a tremendous amount of energy for a being to manipulate the electromagnetic field, which is what defines them as a poltergeist, right? Is that they're able to manipulate the field. And one reason that it's most commonly that a poltergeist or a ghost becomes known is when there's a child present. And one reason being is because a child's electromagnetic field is a lot more malleable and accessible to these types of energies than an adult. So again, chicken or the egg, you know, but many people believe that a poltergeist can't necessarily move things in the environment unless they have an electromagnetic frequency to grab onto. So there has to be something present for them to shift the frequency. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, though we do see commonly enough that children are highly affected in these situations. And that's going to be a more rare situation where that spirit is trapped, very confused. Lots of things have happened there. And even in those situations, beings can cross. And even going back to what I was saying after the 1 year mark, if they've stayed over a year, they can still cross. Most of the stories I'm telling you, these spirits or souls, it's been past 1 year after their death. So it just might be more difficult for them to do it on their own, but when they have support and assistance, it's very accessible, right? And so that's just something I wanted to touch on today and talk about. And another thing that comes up a lot around this topic, I have a lot of clients calling to connect with a loved one who's crossed over. And something that, a beloved client, I used to work with a family that I worked with everybody in this family. It was just amazing. I worked with the wife and the husband. I worked with all the animals. There was like 5 animals. And through the time of us all working together, 1 cat had passed, 2 dogs had passed, and one of the dogs that I worked with, and we had this really amazing experience. At one point, this book will get published, but through his hospice, basically, we were doing daily communications because he was in hospice. And he told the family that he wanted to meet daily so that they could organize how they were going to stay in communication after he crossed. And throughout these conversations, he told us that he wanted to write his memoirs, which was so cool. And we did. He wrote his memoirs. I telepathically relayed it. The wife turned it into a book. Hopefully that'll publish at some point if you're interested in reading it. It's awesome. But this dog, yeah, I know, it was so cool. The dog told the family that what's really, really imperative, and since this communication, I've heard this a lot from beings on the other side, is that the number one thing that blocks the connection. So something that's really common is that people want to feel their loved ones. They want a sign. They want a message. They want to feel them, see them in the dreams, right? They want validation. They want to know there's still that connection. And the biggest thing that blocks that is, ironically, and this could be infuriating to some people, but is the living person's feelings around loss. So when we lose someone and we feel like they're gone, that belief that they're gone and that we've lost them, that they're missing, creates a chasm. And that's one of those things like, what do you mean? How, of course I'm going to feel that way. How do I not? Well, it's difficult to shift the relationship through a certain perspective like that. So what I tell clients to do is compartmentalize. In one way, we know we miss them. We know they're gone. We know that they're not going to be physical anymore, and that saddens us. And that exists. That's very real. And at the same time, we have a new relationship that has formed, that's happening. And in this relationship, while we have to get used to them not being here in the physical, we trust and know that we're connected to them in the energetic and the spiritual. And we're building and cultivating this relationship. And this is very, very, very important. And the more you can lean into this while you're still feeling this, it doesn't mean deny yourself your bereavement. Please go through your grief and your bereavement. It's very important. But at the same time, you are open to the new relationship that's forming. And you can trust in that. And there's so much beauty in, I have experienced and seen just phenomenal bonds happening with loved ones on the other side. Once you lean into that relationship, and you have access, obviously, through communication, or at least you live through your own one-sided communication to them. Like sometimes that can be enough if you're not hearing them or feeling them the way that you want. But that's very important. That piece is a really big reason why they can't reach you, because your belief systems hold strong. Just like we said, when they cross, depending on how they think and believe is potentially what manifests what they're experiencing. It's the same in this realm. We're just not as clear about it. Our belief systems and our thoughts is what anchors what we're experiencing. And if you think about, even though we have this time delay where we're not aware and it's not super obvious that we're manifesting what we're believing, it's very obvious for them. And so your belief holds strong on the other side. They're going to respect, if they love you, they're going to respect your boundaries. And that's like a universal law. Even though they try really hard to bypass it, sometimes they can't. So you have to suspend that in a way, or have an allowance for while you're missing them, you're also creating this new beautiful relationship that can be super potent. And that's a phenomenal experience. I have had such an interesting time around the same time that I told you guys this story before on a live, where there was a time in my life while I was living at that place with this amazing couple, and I was really, really invested in my spiritual practice, and I was just really deep into communing with spirit. And I had a lot of beings that I would connect with, including like all of the loved ones that have passed on. And at this same time, it was when I had an experience where my relationship with spirit shifted from like a devotional relationship to something omnipotent and outside myself that I believed created me, to spirit feeling like my best friend and being in me at all times. And there was this massive intimacy shift I had with spirit, where it went from, I no longer was like putting spirit like on a pedestal above me and bigger than me, and outside in some way. It was now me, and the spirit was my best friend and my lover and my child and my parents and all of it. It was just a shift. And around the same time that was happening, I was so fulfilled in these etheric relationships and telepathic communications I was having with all of these different beings. It was so enriching that I didn't require them to be in the physical. And it just helped me get out of that belief that they're missing, right? And of course it's different when they're not physical, but it still can be so enriching and fulfilling when they're in spirit. And that is what you want to lean into when they cross, is the new relationship, and get curious about how you can experience that. And that one huge shift will help them be able to access you more and more. Now, I will say, something that I have been told several times is that it takes the soul strategy, and they have to learn how to access you in their dream. That's not something that comes just because they've crossed. That actually is something that a lot of them have told me they had to learn how to do it, and it's not the easiest thing, and it takes time. And so if you've had visitations in your dream, awesome. So great that they know how to do that and you're being able to connect with them. But if you haven't, it's not because they don't want to. Okay? It's not because they're not trying. It's just what I've been told several times by different beings and spirits. That is like a skill set that they have to learn if they didn't already know it. And it takes some, it takes some capability. But that doesn't need to stop you from trying to visit them, right? You could still ask to go visit them and see them and connect with them. So anyway, that was just something I wanted to share on my experience with the other realm. Kind of on the flip side of that, I was mentioning how I've talked to, just last week, I talked to a new client who she's wants to get pregnant. And I told her, I've had like a handful of clients come to me and they're so overwhelmed or sad or distraught because they want to be pregnant and they don't know why they're not. And every time I've tuned into the spirit baby, the spirit baby says, just matter of fact, there's some level of shadow work that the parents still have to do before the spirit will incarnate, because they don't want to take on that karmic baggage, which from an outsider's observer standpoint, not going through that emotional turmoil, I think that is so awesome, because this spirit is like, my house needs to be clean and I will wait. I'm already lined up. It's going to be me, but I'm not in a rush until you do this so that I don't have to deal with that, because that's not my baggage. And that's just the coolest thing, I think. And usually, once the parents are notified of that, and if they're open to doing the work, they start working on it, they get pregnant. It's super neat. So, and that's another thing, is like spirit babies can be communing a lot as well. So I don't know if any of you guys have had that. Have any of you ladies experienced the spirit babies lingering around? I have had some wild experiences with that. When I was living in Hawaii, I was in my 20s, and the veil is very thin in Hawaii, right? There's a lot of, it's a lot easier to open up to your psychic abilities and tune in and have all these experiences, because it's just a high vibe frequency there. And man, oh man, I was constantly having experiences with spirit babies around me and trying to get in. And it was happening, and I could feel them, and they'd talk to me, and it wasn't like multiples at once necessarily, but it was different spirits at different times, right? It wasn't just like one spirit trying to come through. And it was so palpable that I used to go weekly there was a psychic center there, a psychic school. And they offered like once or twice a week, you could go sit and get a free energy healing, offer donation so that their new students could practice. And I went every week. I went and I go get my free healing from, these different students. And a lot of them would say to me, oh, you've got a spirit baby in your field, or whatever they called it, right? And I'm like, yeah. And they're all excited about it. I'm like, we're not letting that in. I'm not ready for that. Right? And I've had some wild experiences with that. I've actually I've watched one try to access and like anchor in energetically, and I cast it out and like, no. And I saw it go. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen spirits, but when you're seeing it, it's plasmatic, like physically seeing it, not psychically. But I could see the plasmatic aura, orb or whatever. It went, I was like, okay, you get out of here. I'm not ready for you right now. So that's another thing that can be happening too, right? Because there are a lot of beings and spirits pressing to get in, man. This is a very exciting time from that realm's perspective to be incarnated. So a lot of them want in right now. So if that's an experience that you are wanting to have, if you're trying to get pregnant or thinking about it, you know, or even like, you know, that's in your future, you can start talking to the spirits and building this relationship and trying to inquire maybe through your intuition what it is that they're going to need from you before it's time. Like, what are the lessons? What are maybe some things that they are going to require that you do your work on before they will, before you will conceive? And that's a cool thing too, to connect on that level and have this kind of intuitive psychic relay throughout that whole process. That's a really neat thing. So I'm going to wrap it up now, guys. If you guys have any questions, pop them in. Otherwise, I'll hop off here in a couple minutes. And thank you so much for your time hanging out with me and talking story. Oh, last thing I wanted to note is I watched a astrology report today by, I think her name is Marin Altman. And today, I'm in the USA. Tonight, our night of April 1st, we're experiencing a Libra full moon. This full moon astrologically represents potentially an ending to some toxic relationship. And that doesn't have to be something big and dramatic. And it's just going to be possibly, if you're experiencing it, you come to a decision that you're done. Like, there's no more of this. And it doesn't have to be anything big, because the energy of Libra is actually going to be quite civil and balanced. It'll just be you understanding that this isn't what's good for you in your life, right? You make that own ultimatum inside yourself. Knee Deep says, yep, yeah, right? And before I watched that video, because I haven't really been paying attention to a lot of the astrology lately, I had an experience today where it wasn't some big thing, but it was like me setting a boundary in that regard. And then I watched this, and what lined up with me last week around setting a very big boundary around a very big relationship in my life, I ended in a very specific way. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. That lines up perfectly. So on that note, if you're open to some ritual tonight, you know, maybe a burning or something, so that you can offer your permissions and your validation that anything that you don't want to be experiencing in your life, you say, you put a quits to, you kibosh it, right? It is a perfect night to do that. Okay, guys, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and I hope to see you again next Wednesday or Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.